Hey guys, welcome back. Reviewing while driving. Going to be talking this morning about the specifics of the campaign questionnaire in order to have the collaborative campaign building that I talked about in my previous video. So we're going to go step by step through the actual questionnaire itself and kind of go over what the questions were designed to elicit. So I had a long preamble on the thing, and the idea was to get people in the mood, because this is a different kind of exercise, right? I mean, you are essentially telling them, don't worry about the game world, don't worry about the metagaming, don't worry about the rules, you know, put all the gamer stuff away for a second and focus on what do you want to do? What kind of character do you want to play? And like I said before, that is a profound question. Most people, you know, in a group, either they're motivated by different things, right? They could be motivated by, you know, wanting to blow off some steam, a desire to feel personally powerful. They could want just the social aspect and the engagement of it, you know, being with their friends, just hanging out, you know, kind of a, instead of bowling, we play games, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of that too. But as a result, what kind of gets lost in the shuffle is the kind of the inner nerd joy, right? Of what do you want to do? I mean, really. And, you know, it's hard sometimes for people to narrow it down. They say, well, I'd love to do this, or I'd like to do that. And, or maybe they have an idea, but they haven't really tried it. And so they have a concept without really a structure, or the other way around. They may think, you know, I'll give you my example, okay? And this may sound hyper specific, but I've had this idea in my head of a sailing character. This is a character who is comfortable on a ship, and I had this other idea that he would be a mapper and a cartographer, that he was this explorer type character, sort of a blend of, you know, Odysseus and you know, maybe a little Captain Kirk, right? Somebody who was, you know, who could fight, but who was a leader and who was a sailor. He was heroic and crafty, you know, that sort of character. And that's what I had in mind. I've always wanted to do it. And, you know, there really aren't a whole lot of traditional D&D games that support that sort of character. I mean, it's most of the games are on land, and I would say most of the on-land encounters, maybe 60-70%, are indoors or underground. And so, you know, those there's not a lot of call for that, except on some, you know, special settings, or I guess you could build a whole campaign around it, you know, have a pirates campaign or a merchant campaign or something. But that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to have this explorer character. And so I knew this, and I wanted to sort of use my own example of, well, why do I want this? And what is it about him that I like? And what kind of a game world does he live in? So I used my own desire for this character to build the questions that I was going to ask all the other players, okay? So, for example, I needed to know overall, who is this person? You know, everything from the biographical stuff, you know, gender, race, age, heritage, highborn, lowborn, wealth, all those different aspects of the character's biography, and also his, you know, his personality. Is he introverted or extroverted, and is he really grounded in facts, or is he more of a touchy-feely guy? You know, what kind of thinker is he? You know, if you met him at a party, what would he say? What are some of his quirks? And, you know, I think to some extent the Player's Handbook now in 5th edition does a great job of pulling those things out with the bonds and the flaws and the traits. I think those are helpful, you know, sort of hooks to hang your character on, and along with alignment and things like that. But So it was just a way to define more and more who this character was. And those questions actually ended up being, I would say, at least 15 to 20 questions, just kind of describing the character. And you know, I didn't really get into specifics with stats, but I did ask, okay, what are his best stats in game terms? You know, is it strength, you know, whatever, or what are his worst ones? And so for him, I put down that it was his charisma and his strength. So I envisioned this sort of leader, charismatic, also intelligence, that he would be smart and crafty. You know, that's what I was envisioning. And probably Odysseus more than anything else was what I had in mind, but in a, you know, traditional D&D tech level, and you know, the fantasy that goes with it. So then the question was, okay, what sort of game world does this character occupy, and do I want to play in, right? Because those are sort of the same thing. Since I'm making my character for my perfect game, you know, ideally, those should be the same thing. What I want to do should be the same thing as what world this character fits in. That shouldn't require a whole lot of reconciling. And so for me, I made notes about, okay, what kind of magic level, tech level, what was the threat level? Was this a dangerous campaign? How powerful are the characters? You know, in general, are they, you know, these super-powered gods? Are they, you know, heroic adventurers? Are they, you know, just kind of commoners? All those types of questions. And, you know, how prevalent were magic items, not just magic level, but magic items. And then I really got specific also about the setting. So in other words, not just the sort of the game structure, but the specific setting of, okay, where is he based out of? Is it a village or a town, or is it a castle, or are they just, you know, all alone in the wilderness? That kind of thing. Is there what climate is there? Who are some of the important groups around? That sort of thing. So the idea was, I was building this, the questions to populate a database, essentially, that would give me the information I needed, so that I could find out what everybody felt about this topic. And what was interesting about it was that what I ended up describing about this character, and this is just for me, I think there are other players who approached it differently, but for me, I approached it more from a background perspective first, instead of a you know, class-based approach, which I think is frankly the norm. You know, most people say, well, I'm going to play a, you know, a devotion paladin, or I'm going to play a champion fighter, or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that, okay? But with my approach, he was like part noble, part sailor, you know, in the background. So I really wasn't terribly committed to the class. I was more interested in who he is as a person. And that's how I approached it. And, you know, and that's okay. I mean, you can come at this lots of different ways, right? I mean, we had players that were like very vague. Okay, like one fella, he had this idea of he knew he wanted to play a ranged archer type character, and when I pressed him about why, and by the way, he didn't even fill out the questionnaire. I had to do it with an interview, you know, one-on-one, which is fine. And when I pressed him about it, he just felt more comfortable as a player, being in the back, being a damage dealer, but a ranged fighter. That was just his shtick, and that's what he likes to do and what he wants to do, and so that's what he did. So he had no concept of his background, the guy's name. For him, the hook was his role in combat. Okay, I mean, he didn't even have an idea of his role outside of combat. Now, it probably doesn't surprise you to learn that he's an introvert, and he's really not much for social interactions. And so then for him, what I was trying to do was to make him happy, because he's the kind of guy that's going to get lost in the shuffle during the interactions, you know, just in the table and with a big group like I have. That's a real problem. So trying to get him engaged, he's very functional in combat, but I was trying to, you know, find out how he could be useful outside of combat. So that was how he approached his character. Another guy had a very, I think, a similar approach as I did, which was he had a background basis where he wanted to be a noble, and moreover, he wanted to be in the royal family and be this sort of heroic fighter, you know, leading from the front kind of guy. He wasn't super locked in on a character class, but he knew he wanted to be a human, and he wanted to be this sort of, Maximus or King Arthur type person, okay? Sort of this, you know, charismatic, frontline leader fighter, okay? And he wanted to be rich and powerful. And that's not unusual, by the way. I mean, a lot of people play this game for wish fulfillment, right? We play what we wish we were sometimes. Or as an expression of our id, right? Of either who we think we really are, or who we should be, or who we want to be. And you know, that's kind of a deep realization when you start kind of digging in there. And, you know, and it explains why some players want to play a certain kind of character all the time, you know. It's like branch out a little, right? But, that's okay. The point of this exercise was to get everybody to play their uber character that they really would want to play. Now, another guy was your traditional power gamer, and that's obviously a pejorative term, but his approach was he knew he wanted to play a psionic character. Well, I had no inkling of having psionics in the game, really. I mean, I had a couple thoughts out there, you know, depending on how things would go, but he really wanted to play this, you know, mind-bending guy who could know everything and influence people, and, you know, he had secret powers that nobody knew about, and it was powerful and mysterious, and, you know, he has kind of a reputation in the group of playing these sort of gish, do-everything characters, and so he wants to be the best at everything. And, you know, obviously that needs to be held in check somewhat and give everybody a chance to shine. But, you know, so what am I going to do? I'm going to change the whole concept because I don't like his idea? No, I mean, the concept is that everybody plays what they really want to play. So guess what? We added psionics, and we're using some playtest rules of it, even though, you know, the game's been out for 2 years now. We're playing with playtest version of psionics, and it's okay. It may be a little overpowered, but so he approached this from a standpoint of his character class. I mean, he focused on it more of what could his guy do, you know? And then he sort of built the personality and the background around that. Now, to his credit, unlike some power gamers, he's also an interactor, and so he had a very detailed background that described, you know, exactly, you know, who he was and how he fit in the power structure, and he had a relationship with the noble fighter character I told you about. Okay. Then there's another player type where they want to, they have a hard time with the idea of this being a blind questionnaire, right? This idea that they should be making this decision in a vacuum. These are your team player, generally support type personalities where they love the camaraderie, they love the story and the setting, and so they want it to be a successful setting in a meta sense, and so they go like, okay, well, I want to play what the party needs. Well, you know, that's sort of the codependent gamer, right? That's the guy who's, you know, so concerned about everybody else's happiness. Well, it's like, okay, well, don't worry about that. Tell me what you want to do. And so some of these people, you have to bring them out of their shell, not just from a extroversion point of view, but you got to draw them out of their shell in terms of setting aside their selflessness so that they can actually, do what they want to do. And I would wager that a lot of those characters, what they want to do is be a support character because they enjoy taking care of other people and meeting other people's needs. And that's exactly what he ended up doing. Now, that character, and he came up with a great background, and he made this elf cleric, a light cleric, and made up this entire religious organization built around his religion, or it's a she, but the character's religion, and the entire society that was built around it. So he had these incredible ideas. I just had to get him out of his normal headspace and get him to focus on what he really wanted to do. So generally speaking, players are going to be motivated in their approach to this in different ways. And they could think their character approach could come from their role. It could come from their class. It could come from the background, like I was doing with my sailor guy. It could also come from something as hyper specific, like the first character I ever played when I was a kid, his name was Osric or whatever, right? So you could say, I never got Osric right. I really wish that I had, I want to play Osric like he's meant to be played, and so you have that really hyper specific concept. Okay, that's fine. And it could be, or you could just have a trigger based on a name. Maybe you came up with a cool character name and you just say, I'm going to make this really uber character for me, my expression of what I want to do the most out of this name. Or maybe it's something like a miniature, right? Like I see this physical embodiment of my character that's really cool, and I'm going to build a character around that miniature, every detail of it. That's going to be my foundation of who this character is. So it doesn't really matter how they come up with the concept, just that they do it and that they're honest. And so what you'll end up with is a really cool set of facts that lead you to this party of characters. And you know what? If there's no wizard, that's okay. If there's no cleric or rogue, that's okay. There are NPCs, right? There are henchmen. There might be, adventuring, cohorts. Don't worry about that, okay? And make that their problem, right? I mean, if they want to adventure without a rogue, go for it. There's no rule that says they have to have that, or that they even have to have a cleric, I mean, with all the hit dice and, healer's kits, I mean, you could probably skate by. You might approach things a little differently, but, that can be done. So don't get too bent out of shape about, balance, or, gosh, there's 5 dwarves and 1 human, don't worry about that. That's going to dictate the campaign, right? So don't put the cart before the horse. Don't worry too much about what the campaign looks like at this stage. Focus on who the characters are and what kind of a game world that they would inhabit, and try to find that that overlap in the circles, on that circle graph. Find those overlapping areas, and they may not all overlap in the same area. There may be 2 or 3 common areas, and you can somehow link them either in a map, like some of the characters are from here and the other rest are from over here, or you could link them in a literal way. You could link them in a story way. So don't get too bent out of shape. And then at the next stage, don't get too focused on trying to make them fit into what you already had in mind. It's the other way around. You're making your setting fit around them. Okay, and that really requires an openness and a willingness to chuck what you've already done out the window, and your previous thoughts. So again, don't subjugate yourself. You're a character too, but you have to be willing to let that go for the betterment of the group, so that everybody can have this wonderful experience. Because when you're in that zone and everybody's participating and giving you content and really in the moment, you've made something unique and special, and that's not possible if you are holding on to control too much. So next video I will talk about the idea of coming up with a setting then that meshes rather with the database that you've compiled about the players and their players' wishes. And so coming up with a setting or two or three, and getting a proposal out to your players, and then letting them pick it and tweak it and refine it, and then really building the campaign around what you've already done. Thanks for watching.